Then on Sports Central, we go for our next team prediction of this offseason, and it's going to be over the UCF Knights, the team that went 9-5 overall in the 2022 season. A good season for UCF to wrap up their time in the American, and it is on to a new era in the Big 12. UCF is headed to the Power 5 this season. How will this team be in 2023? And why I think this team could potentially even be a dark horse contender in the Big 12 this season is what we'll be talking about here today. We'll be analyzing this team and predict their schedule game by game in this video. Let's get started with a quick recap of 2022. Once again, the record 9-5. And I mean, this was a good team last season that was very dominant at the start of the season, other than the Louisville loss. They, of course, beat SC State 56-10 to start the season, lost to Louisville by 6. Yes, that was the one disappointment in the first 6 games. Then they beat FAU on the road 40-14, beat Georgia Tech 27-10, beat SMU 41-19, beat Temple 70-13, completely destroyed Temple there. And that was on a Thursday night. Then they went the next week to East Carolina. Did lose this game in disappointing fashion. 34-13 was the final. But came back. A nice win over Cincinnati, 25-21. Beat Memphis by a touchdown. Beat Tulane by a touchdown on the road. Tulane, of course, a huge standout. The best group of 5 team last season, you probably could say. I mean, they, of course, beat USC in the Cotton Bowl. So that honestly should be undisputed. And eventually, UCF did lose to Tulane in the AAC Championship 45-28, but still nice win in the regular season there. Lost to Navy by 3 and then beat USF South Florida 46-39 to finish out the regular season. And of course, the postseason, a bit disappointing, loss over Tulane or against Tulane, and then lost to Duke in the Military Bowl 30-13. And Duke was a good team last season, really a big dark horse in the ACC, really had very low expectations heading into the season, and they ended up being a pretty solid team last season, and Duke got the win there 30-13. So a bumpy finish to the season, but still definitely a great year for the Knights. But with that, let's take a look into 2023 now. Your roster preview heading into the season. John Rhys Plumlee is coming back, the starting quarterback for this team, who overall was excellent last season, 2,600 yards, 14 touchdowns over 8 picks, and a 63% completion rate. A really talented quarterback, especially in rushing. Last season, he rushed for nearly 900 yards and 11 touchdowns as well. So he's a true dual-threat quarterback. Last season, his passing stats maybe were a bit average, really didn't stand out too much. But, I mean, he still passed for nearly 2,600 yards, and he rushed for like 900 yards on top of that. So really impressive overall what he did last season. He's a quarterback to keep an eye on. I'm looking forward to 2023. Isaiah Bowser is gone, the top running back for this team, who transferred in from, I believe, Northwestern. Last season, he was definitely impressive, put up nearly 1,000 yards total, 16 touchdowns. So it's going to be tough losing him, but at least you got RJ Harvey and Johnny Richardson coming back, both of them who combined for over 1,500 yards last season and 6 touchdowns. So that's definitely good. Plus, of course, John Rhys Plumlee, who can really rush the ball well, so I'm not too concerned about the backfield. The receiving core, you do return your top receiver in Javon Baker. You do lose Ryan O'Keefe, your second wideout, but you return your third in Kobe Hudson. Those were your primary 3 wideouts from last season. Otherwise, it drops off quite a bit. But so losing your second wideout is definitely a tough loss, but at least you got your top and your third coming back. So some pretty good depth, I do think, for UCF in the skill players positions. You lose 2 on the offensive line, 1 defensive lineman, 1 linebacker, and then 4 in the secondary. So the other area that I am a bit concerned in is the defensive secondary, especially going up against a lot of these tough and really strong Big 12 offenses, especially when it comes to passing. So that is something to keep in mind. You're going to be facing a lot better offenses in the Big 12 than you were in the American, that is for sure. But I do think there's a lot of potential on this team, a lot of good depth. I mean, this is the first season in the Big 12, and I've said this a few times in recent videos. I do think if there's if any of the 4 teams, the 4 newcomers coming into the Big 12 are going to be a contender, it's going to be UCF. UCF is built to win right now. I do think this is a team to keep an eye on. I don't think that they end up winning the conference or even being up there as a major contender. I think that's going to be for, say, Texas and Oklahoma and Kansas State. But UCF is in that next tier. They are not far behind, and I can see this team definitely causing some noise in the conference this season. So yeah, definitely keep an eye on the Knights. But with that, let's take a look at the transfer portal and recruiting now. So you do lose a couple of quarterbacks, Mikey Keene and then Thomas Castellanos off to Fresno State and Boston College respectively. But you bring in Timmy McClain from South Florida, who is expected to be the primary backup for this team here in 2023. Ryan O'Keefe, the second wideout for this team last season, is off to Boston College, but you bring in Chauncey Magwood coming in from Kentucky, and then Trent Whittemore. Both of them are expected to be wide receiver twos on the team. Both of them are expected to be a ways back in the depth chart, but I do expect them to at least get some action here in 2023. Amari Kite is coming in from Alabama. Bula Schmidt is coming in from Fresno State. Both of these guys are expected to be starters in 2023. Marcellus Marshall, him as well, coming in from Kent State. And you had some depth with Drake Metcalf coming in from Stanford. Jeremiah Jean-Baptiste, a linebacker, off to Ole Miss. You bring in Ryan Davis from Georgia, linebacker, and then defensive back Devontae Brown is off to Miami. Jere Wilson, safety, is coming in from East Carolina. Justin Hodges, defensive back, is off to Ole Miss, and then you bring in Fred Davis II from Clemson. So the transfer portal has been generally really good for this team. I mean, 6 of these players are expected to be starters here in year 1 for the Knights. So that's definitely good. Recruiting-wise, not too bad. 50th in the country, 9th in the Big 12. You got 3 4-stars coming in, 12 3-stars. So the recruiting could be better. But overall, I mean, it could be worse as well. I mean, it's also 9 out of 14 now. Of course, we're used to the Big 12 only having 10 teams, but obviously now it's got 14. So not terrible for UCF, and I've got this team at an 8 out of 10 on the future forecast meter. Once again, I do think if any of the 4 newcomers are going to be a contender in the near future, in this season especially, it's going to be UCF. This team is built to win right now. I like what Gus Malzahn is doing with this team, and this team is in a good position right now. I do think, especially with the Big 12 looking as wide open as ever in the future, especially once Oklahoma and Texas are off to the SEC. But with that, let's take a look at the schedule now as we look into 2023, and you start your season on a Thursday night against Kent State there at home, then Boise State on the road. That Boise State game is going to be a challenge there. I do think Boise State is definitely one of the main contenders in the Mountain West. And then you got Villanova at home, Kansas State on the road to kick off your conference schedule in the Big 12, first Big 12 game, and you're taking on the defending champs in Kansas State. That's going to be a challenge there for sure. And then you got Baylor at home, Kansas on the road, and then your bye, and then you got a road trip to Norman to take on Oklahoma, West Virginia at home, Cincinnati on the road, Oklahoma State at home, Texas Tech on the road, and then Houston at home to finish out the regular season. So down the stretch, you're basically alternating going on the road and being home every game, which can be a good thing and a bad thing. You don't have many long road stretches, but at the same time, you're not at home for a long period of time either, obviously. But it is definitely a challenging schedule, probably one of the more tougher schedules, I would say, in the Big 12. You don't have to play Texas. Your Big 3 in the Big 12 this season will be Oklahoma, Kansas State, and then Texas. You got Oklahoma and Kansas State on the road fairly early in this season. So down the stretch, and of course Texas Tech, they are no joke either. Cincinnati, that's a familiar opponent. Houston as well. You don't play BYU. So it's definitely an interesting first year for this team in the Big 12. And with that, let's look at September. So Kent State, easy win. You take care of them, no problem. Boise State on the road. This is a tough game here, traveling all the way across the nation to take on a talented Boise State team. I do think you drop this one. This will be a close one. Could definitely go either way, but I'm going to take Boise State. I do think they're talented enough, and they get it done there. And then you got Villanova. You take care of them, and then Kansas State on the road. A tough one here as well. Kansas State next season. I do like this team. Will Howard. I wouldn't be surprised if they won their second straight Big 12 title here in 2023. So I do want to take the Wildcats there. I think UCF hangs in there, and I do think UCF has got one of the absolute strongest home field advantages in the Big 12. I mean, being in Central Florida, not a lot of these Big 12 teams are used to traveling to Florida, which is a very hot, humid place, especially. I mean, it's honestly like that all the way through November, but especially in September, October. I mean, it's going to be a tough place to play for these Big 12 teams that are used to a much different climate. So it is something to keep in mind, and I do think UCF has got a nice advantage there. But of course, your home field advantages come against Houston, Oklahoma State, West Virginia, Baylor. So it would be nice if you had like Kansas State or Oklahoma at home, but unfortunately you don't. You got Kansas on the road. I do think looking at your next 4 games, Baylor and Kansas are both wins. You get a couple of really nice wins here. Both games will be close, but you get it done. And then Oklahoma on the road, I do think you drop this one here. Norman's a tough place to play. That place is going to be loud. I do think the Sooners will be better this season. So I do think you lose that one. And then West Virginia at home. A nice, easy win here. West Virginia is expected to be the worst team in the conference, and there's a reason for that. I do think you take care of them, no problem. So you're 5-3 heading into November. Cincinnati on the road. I do think you drop this one on the road in Cincinnati. I think the Bearcats next season are definitely in a bit of a rebuild phase. No more Luke Fickell, and that team is definitely going to be a bit inexperienced, but I do think this is a game where you'll probably be favored, but you end up losing it in a close one. A bit of a disappointing loss there. It's very winnable, though. And then Oklahoma State, you beat them in a close one. A nice win there as well. Texas Tech on the road. I do want to take Texas Tech there. Red Raiders are for real. That's a team that was really impressive, especially towards the end of last season. So I see Texas Tech being decent. You lose to them. And then Houston, you take care of them. No problem to finish out the regular season. So, I mean, Houston and Cincinnati both have got right around 4 or 5 wins. I do have BYU at 6 or 7, and then UCF is at 7. I think this team has got the capability to be an 8 or 9 win team, though. I've got the ceiling at 9-3 for this team. I do think Boise State, very winnable game. Cincinnati is very winnable, even Texas Tech. So, I mean, I do have the ceiling at 9-3. 9-3 is reasonable for this team. I do have this team taking a couple of close losses there on the road, but I've got you guys undefeated at home, actually, which is definitely a positive if that goes through. And then 5-7 is the floor for this team, which is the worst possible record you could have. So more than likely you'll see this team in a good bowl game, I do think. And obviously being in the Big 12, you'll probably be taking on a halfway decent team, even if you just get 7 wins. So definitely an interesting season coming up here for the Knights. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below on UCF, and I appreciate you guys all watching as always. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. Catch you on the next one.